What do you guys think happens when we die? When my grandfather's health had declined to the point it was clear he would not recover, he was offered counseling to help him prepare for the end. Not a particularly religious man, but raised Christian, he chose to have a few sessions with a priest to talk about life, the end of it and possibly an afterlife. The priest asked him, "You are going to die soon, how does that make you feel?" To which my grandpa answered, "I don't know, I've never done it before. I wish that when my time comes I'll feel the same acceptance and will be as down to earth as that man, my example and my hero. We don't know and all we can do is wait and see. I am okay with that." His response made me smirk. When my Phil was diagnosed as terminal, he started counseling. I could totally see him saying something like that in response to the question. There's a book that describes 5 stages of grief. I think it is On Death and Dying by Catherine Kubler-Ross. Acceptance is a stage. It is worth taking a look at that book. If we know that we are dying, we experience grief for our own lives. Anger, negotiation, acceptance, and a couple of others are described as totally normal and expected. You can cycle through the stages or jump around in them. I am sorry for your loss. Last year on the 4th of March was my Bob's last day in this life. We all experience these things when we love someone. Know that being able to love deeply is a gift. Purple Heart, 2 hearts, edit, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Hopefully the ketamine rush. Sprinkle in some tea and sounds fun. Experienced great death I have, to the world of ketamine I must go. You stop fearing death, that's for sure. Death does not concern us, because as long as we exist, death is not here. And when it does come, we no longer exist. I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. Mark Twain. I'm hoping to meet up with my dog and cross the rainbow bridge with him. But I'm afraid nothingness awaits. My cat'll be waiting for me and she'll prob just bite me. Reading this just made me bust out crying because it's exactly how I feel. I miss my boys so much, and one of my biggest fears is not being able to reunite with them. Frown. Death is just another path, one that we all must take. The grey rain curtain of this world rolls back and all turns to silver glass, and then you see it. White shores and beyond, a far green mountain under a swift sunrise. J.R.R. Tolkien. That doesn't sound so bad. Yeah, it's a movie quote, not a Tolkien quote. The book quote is, "Then Frodo kissed Merry and Pippin, and last of all Sam, and went aboard, and the sails were drawn up, and the wind blew, and slowly the ship slipped away down the long grey firth, and the light of the glass of Galadriel that Frodo bore glimmered and was lost. And the ship went out into the high sea and passed on into the west, until at last on a night of rain Frodo smelled a sweet fragrance on the air and heard the sound of singing that came over the water. And then it seemed to him that as in his dream in the house of Bombadil, the grey rain curtain turned all to silver glass and was rolled back, and he beheld white shores and beyond them a far green country under a swift sunrise." Picture a wave in the ocean, you can see it, measure it, its height, the way the sunlight refracts. And then it crashes on the shore and then it's gone. But the water is still there. The wave was just a different way for the water to be for a little while. That's one conception of death for a Buddhist. The wave returns to the ocean, where it came from, and where it's supposed to be. Chidi Anagonye, The Good Place. You and I are all as much continuous with the physical universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean. Alan Watts. I'm an atheist, but I do appreciate Buddhism for its philosophy. I like to think of it like a deep sleep but with no dreams. When you are asleep but are not dreaming, you are completely unaware of yourself, where you are, or even that you exist. I think death is probably the same. I have the same theory but can't decide if this sounds scary to me, sounds peaceful, or that I'm utterly neutral on the subject. Neutrality sounds like the most appropriate response, as nothingness isn't inherently good or bad. My opinion changes regularly, so maybe it's somehow a mixture of all three. When you go down for surgery, you are wide awake one moment, and the next thing you know you're coming to in the recovery area. It doesn't matter how much time has passed, that period of darkness could have been 5 minutes or 5 hours and it would feel the same to you. So who knows, maybe we'll die and at some point 50 billion years from now, when the right molecules come together in the right way, consciousness will exist for us again. I will tell you when I discover it. You're the forehead to rule them all, Lamal. While I'm in bright sunlight, please. And surrounded by priests for preference. Sorts by controversial. How do comments get determined to be controversial? Seriously, I have always wanted to know. Ugh, it's just a bunch of new agey nutjobs, and not the interesting kind. Disappointed. I legitimately have no clue at all and don't want to waste time guessing. What I hope happens is I can somehow interact still with all the people I've loved in my life. I know that's really optimistic, but if I could decide what happens, I'd love for that to be true. The only thing that I'm pretty sure of is that a human body and mind are limited in perceptive capacity. I think whatever does happen, it's not going to be what I expect. Edit, thanks for the badges and upvotes, people. I hope you all have a good day, smile. That's a pretty good answer. I kind of hope for something similar, like you get to float around and watch other people or something. I'm far too invested in this whole humanity thing to dip out without knowing what happens to us. If we're lucky, someone deletes our browser history. Blast my cache. Have you seen that time I got reincarnated as a slime? Literally how it opens. Probably like sleep, except you don't dream or wake back up. Sleep is practice for death. I nearly died from an asthma attack when I was 14. That's pretty much what it was like at the end of it. I was lying on the ground looking up at the sky and everything just kinda faded away. I eventually woke up, of course, and the overall thing was 0-10 do not recommend, but the actual going unconscious part really was just like going to sleep. Don't you know where you were before you were born? You're going back to that stuff. I can't even remember where I was a year ago. My father's balls? The student loan people go after our families. Do they really? Here in Italy, if you accept the inheritance, you also inherit all debts. So I've had several near-death experiences of various kinds, 2 traumatic head injuries resulting in extended loss of consciousness, 1 very close call with strep as a young kid resulting in life-threatening fever, and these definitely inform my view. My experience is that when the body is struggling to hold on to life and basically rerouting all resources to regenerative mechanisms, consciousness kind of dials back in scope, pretty similarly to certain types of drug trips I've experienced, especially ketamine. When there's any awareness at all within a near-death state, it's not like normal waking consciousness, it's much more rudimentary. You may be aware of colors, sounds, tactile contact, etc. But you tend to lack any conceptual framework for the sensations. You just register a sense, and that's that. The parts of your mind that are normally sorting, categorizing, and putting all that data input together to form consciousness aren't really needed for the task at hand, so they kind of just get out of the way. The nature of experience shifts in the direction of what I can only categorize as more dreamlike. Time seems to become distorted, like in a dream, you might experience what feels like an hour in just a few minutes. There is less of a cohesive, grounded sense of personality. We normally can rely on our ego mechanisms to sort and process incoming information. When this is more or less stripped away, awareness is more like a stream of jumbled phenomena. It's easy to lose any sense of self in the mess of unsorted experiential information. My extrapolation from these experiences is that as one gets closer and closer to death, the final shutdown of the brain, the conscious experience may very well continue distorting and dilating indefinitely. At that final point in space-time between dying and final, ultimate shutdown, the nature of our consciousness would be absolutely nothing like the consciousness we've been familiar with over the course of life. I think it's reasonable to presume that all the various conceptions of afterlife cooked up by the world's religions could be interpretations of the literal experience of the moment of dying. The dying person might experience the very moment of their dying for centuries. We do this kind of thing in dreams, experiencing years in the course of just 6 to 8 hours, and that's just routine unconsciousness. When you're down to just that one last flicker of firing neurons before it all goes black, who's to say what our perception of the scope of time would feel like? This is a very interesting perspective. Thank you. I was viewing this on my phone, which has a permabanned Reddit account, used to do a lot of shitposting and trolling, so I couldn't upvote this and reply to it. I booted up my laptop so I could get on my unbanned account. Wish I could award you, but this account ain't got no coins. Anyway, I loved this. Absolutely loved it. I went through the majority of comments in this thread, since the philosophy of consciousness has always been my #1 interest in life. I believe your comment is the absolute best one in the thread. It's the most realistic, and the most consistent with the peak of Eastern philosophy. You provided first-hand experience, articulated it very well, and wrote this thing beautifully. I've had a lot of experience in consciousness exploration through psychedelics, and it's super hard to describe the nature of consciousness in language. Extremely hard. Just like you said, the mind isn't involved in the matter, so the experience isn't labeled, judged, emotional, or language-based, and also because the mind isn't involved, or barely involved, it's really hard to remember these experiences. So, having said that, it's awesome when someone is able to describe the source consciousness like you have. I really like how you describe it as rudimentary and dreamlike. It does feel rudimentary. Like almost primal. Time is irrelevant since that's a construct or tool of the mind. Therefore, it's more like the void or the infinite, however you want to describe it. I have a hard time distinguishing the two, since I believe there cannot be an absence of something unless there is finite. In infinite, there is no finite, therefore nothing is lacking, either. That might be confusing, but I'm not very articulate. Wish I was. I think the nature of consciousness is best represented by metaphor, not by description. There's the one that's popular in this thread, which is that the individual is to the source as a wave is to the ocean. This one captures it perfectly. A wave becomes distinct from the ocean, but it is not separate from the ocean in any way. The entire ocean is still within that wave, and that wave is still within the entire ocean. The wave's existence appears temporary, but it is never lost as it returns form. As manifestations of a great ocean of consciousness, we never lose touch with that, or access, but in order to do so we have to develop our awareness as a witness, so that we can shift our identity away from our body and mind, and witness its actions as an outsider. Then, once we've mastered that, all we have to do is look at the witness. It's the equivalent of looking through a glass window your whole life, until you shift the attention of your eyes and look at the window itself, and now you see your own reflection. It was there the whole time, you just didn't know how to see it, or know to even look. There was a young man who said, though it seems that I know, what I would like to see, is the eye that knows me when I know that I know that I know. Alan Watts. Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.